Behold, I have created a monstrosity. A couple of years ago, someone on a Discord I'm on showed pictures of modifying one of these. This is a Victrola brand, but it's a Crosley for all intents and purposes. These cheap suitcase record players to play 16-inch transcription records. And I was like, that's pretty neat. I actually bought a few just for the novelty of them. So I thought, if I ever see one of these for very cheap, because really, I don't want to pay what people are asking for these aren't worth 50 bucks, then I'll bite. And I found one just recently at a Value Village of all places for $8.50, which is still kind of high, especially since it's set on top that it doesn't work. It doesn't spin, but it works. So I'm like, okay, maybe it just needs a belt or something. And no, it was completely stone dead. The belt was actually good, but let's grab this container of parts here. This main board that handles the Bluetooth, handles the line in, does the amplification, really everything. This IC here was getting incredibly hot, and it was just taking whatever current I threw at it. Well, that's not good. Ow, I guess that's shorted. So, yeah, this was pooched. Now, I don't really need this for my purposes. I don't know if this actually has an amplifier that does the proper curve, RA amplification curve for the ceramic cartridge or not. So, I just pulled it out and bypassed it completely. So before I show you the mess of the underside, let's take a look at the top here. As you can see, the platter has been pushed out past the edges here to make room for the massive record. And the tonearm plenum, or whatever you would call this, has been pushed out to the far edge here. You can see my wonderful job of hot snotting all this together. And in addition, because these records are so large, I think I could have left the tonearm the same, but as you can see with the transcription record, it's at an awkward angle, right? This is a conical stylus, so it shouldn't matter, but the angle was just absurd when you got to the end. So the modification that I was basing this off of used an FM rod antenna. I didn't have an antenna that I wanted to butcher for this project, so I used a Bic pen and just sort of cut the tonearm and then glued a Bic pen in between. But of course that meant now the little latch wouldn't fit over it, so I cut it and I glued part of the pen cap on. And that works just a treat. Now you'll notice that the back of the tonearm looks weird and actually looks different than the video you just saw 2 seconds ago. I've glued a bunch of hardware to the back of it. So these record players don't have an adjustable tracking force. They don't have a counterweight on the back. They don't have a spring. They don't have anything. I measured this before modifying the tonearm at 6.5 grams. So what I did is I glued that bolt to the back, which brought it down to 4. I remember seeing a VUS Life video where he mentioned that 4 to 6 grams was the range for these cartridges, and 5 is ideal. Now, of course, having lengthened the tonearm, those measurements are now completely invalid. I've made this longer and I've added mass to it here. So what I've done is I've readjusted it. The bolt sticks out, so it's got more counterweight that direction, and I've added 2 little bolts. I might go to Home Depot and just buy a bolt I can move up and down on that. The poor man's real counterweight. At any rate though, you can see I've tared this weight, or this scale, to -5. And when I go and weigh it, perfection. Perfection. This is tracking at 5 grams. So if we're gonna follow the data sheet for these cartridges, we good. And to take a look inside, it's even emptier than when it came from the factory. These speakers have been disconnected. I have cut many portions out of this top deck. I have butchered it. I have separated the platter portion from the tone arm portion using a Dremel. Yeah, I've just cut and cut and cut to make it all fit. Used like a composite shim, drilled a hole and bolted it to the deck to add a little shelf here for this to sit on. And this little support piece I notched so it just sits there. And that's just held with glue. The hot glue or hot snot's actually doing a fair bit of heavy lifting on this. Glued everything. And then I did use one of the grommets and the screws from the original design. I added a hole here. And I was originally going to put the grommet on it, but it was riding too high, so I cut that post lower to suck it in. This is all a real hodgepodge, but yeah, it doesn't matter. It's a bodge to get the job done, right? I had to extend the wires for this motor to go to the little control circuit board there. I just reused the wires from the speakers, you know, zero waste. Wires coming from the tone arm for the cartridge, I just soldered directly to the cable coming from the RCA jacks. You can see my little half-ass strain relief there. It's a random piece of hardware and reusing one of the screws from this on a post that was unused. And that's worked out. And then this is just the old audio wires that went to the old amplifier, and that's where the tone arm cartridge wires originally went. They won't reach now that I've extended the tone arm. And all this little board handles is the speed. So this motor is designed for this. It's got a few different inputs, and you can put a resistance in place for different speeds. You connect different wires and put a resistor in there, because this does support all 3 speeds. Although for this purpose, it's pretty much just 33 RPM. And yeah, there's really not much to see underneath here. It's just an arts and crafts project. A lot of glue and some small bit of rewiring. I believe the motor can run on 5 to 12 volts, depending on what data sheet you look up. I'm running it on 5 volts, which is what this original design ran on. And I think that's just because it shared power for the motor with the amplifier board, which actually did run on 5 volts. But I'm thinking I could probably run it on a higher voltage if I want to. But for this purpose, it's going to run on 5 volts. So first off, let's test it with a fairly scratched up transcription record. It's got a bit of bounce, a bit of play, but it is what it is, right? It'll play. Now I have this realistic SA10 little mini amplifier that I'm using, along with some Minimus 7 realistic speakers. This has a ceramic phono input, which will be useful for this. And it also has a stereo mono switch, which is also very useful. Now, unfortunately, this cartridge doesn't work correctly. Of course it doesn't. This whole cheap thing is cheap and crap. The left channel is very buzzy and muffled and has a bunch of noise on it. The right channel works fine. Now, I would say that shouldn't be an issue because this is a mono recording, right? I can just use one channel. But I believe you'll want to get both movements from the groove when you're using like a stereo cartridge. I'm pretty sure. So I may just order a new one just for the heck of it. But I can demonstrate it now as it is. Okay, so right now it's all hooked up and I have it set to stereo. I have both channels plugged in and you can just hear the noise coming from the left channel. Right channel's got a bit of hum, but nowhere near as bad. And it actually seems to be coming from the power supply for this, because if I unplug it, it gets a lot better. But I think something's broken. There's a bad connection in here, so the wire's just floating, and that's why it's just an antenna. It's picking up whatever noise. So this metal piece of the tone arm is actually a shield for those wires. And of course, by using a plastic pen, I've kind of defeated the purpose of that. And I thought maybe some of that humming coming from that channel was because of this. So I tried connecting these two. I tried you know, putting some tin foil, connected all along here to try and shield it, made absolutely no difference. So while I think this is a good idea, and you can hear some noise there, I don't think that's the problem. I think it's the cartridge. And now I will play some music and you'll hear what I mean. So let's just play it with the good channel first. Pretty noisy, it's in rough shape, but it sounds okay. Now what about the left channel? And then the right channel again. So big difference. Cart is a problem. Please ignore the scratchiness of these controls. You have to take this whole amplifier apart to get at them. And I've cleaned them in the past, and then when I leave this sitting, they just get scratchy again. So it is what it is. But what I've been doing for now is I just unplug the left channel and set the switch to mono. So something interesting about this particular transcription disc, it's got multiple songs that are clearly have a gap in between, so you can select each one, but it has a dead runout track in between each one of these. So when a song is over, it just sits there like you're playing the end of a record. And I thought at first this is just, you know, it's damaged, it's scratched, but it does that after every song. And it's on purpose, because if you're in a radio station, you don't want the song to play into the next one by mistake if you're not quick enough. So they each just, you know, end in a dead runout. Right there, you see it? That's the run-in groove for that song. It starts right there. And I believe we can probably see one for this song as well. There it is. And the second thing is, this particular one plays in to out. So we're just at the end of the song here. And then we're just going to sit in the runout track. That's pretty wild. So here's another transcription disc. This one is an Armed Forces Radio Service, the voice of information and education. This particular program is Music America Loves Best. And my understanding is that, you know, during wartime, probably starting as early as like World War II, they would have, you know, musical programs and entertainment for the troops while they're overseas somewhere. You know, think of MASH whenever they had the radio guy doing the announcements over the speakers. So the Army would send out these discs of pre-recorded programming, either music or maybe a radio show that aired live back in the US, and they would have a transcription of it that they'd send out for the troops to listen to. And this is an example of one. So this one plays out to in like a normal record. So these transcription records seem to be all over the place. I've also noticed one said to uses microgroove and to use a 1mm stylus. But then the sleeve that this came in, it says Radio Disc Electrical Transcription from the Allied Record Manufacturing Company in Hollywood, California. And it says here, change needle after every selection. That implies that this has a traditional 78 RPM 3mm groove instead of a micro groove. So yeah, I don't know. We're going to play it with a micro groove stylus and see what it does. Nicely dampened.
One of my favorite operas is The Masked Ball.
It's a little quiet. It actually might do with a 75 3mm stylus. Yeah, I wonder if these are 3mm, because that's a lot of surface noise coming through. Considering the length of the program, it usually shows the length here. Let's see. Maybe. I noticed some of these were pretty short, like in the 20 to 28 minute range. Now for a 16-inch disc, that means you have pretty big grooves. So maybe this isn't a micro groove disc. So that means I would need a different stylus. But yeah, let's try some more. I'm just reading the writing on the lead out groove here. So it's got some stuff there. Part 2, yeah. Music America Loves Best. Number 183. Program time 29:15. Phil T 3030. I don't know what that means. But then this here, is that a date? I think D is date 12/7/47. So this would be from 1947. So yeah, this would be a 3mm. All right, here's one that's a little bit newer. Micro groove, play with 1mm pickup stylus. Perfect. This one's called Mystery Time. Number 34 LP, I guess that refers to the micro groove. 7/1957, so this is 10 years newer. Time is 24:15:25. This says program time 25.
It's mystery time. Time now for the best in mystery. Tonight, Mystery Classic stars Ivor Francis in Death is My Caller. Something's wrong with this broth. It has a peculiar bitter taste.
Okay, that's fantastic. That sounds much clearer, proper. Very happy with that. Sounds like to play some of those other older ones, I'm going to need to put a 3mm stylus in this. Man, I love the artwork on these big sleeve covers. Audio discs. Audio devices on Madison Avenue in New York. And we got Reeves Soundcraft recording discs. 10 East 52nd Street in New York. They're all from New York. Okay, this one's wild. This is thick. This isn't made of vinylite. This is like more of like a traditional 78, a thin 78, but still. And also, it rubs against here. One moment, please. Yeah, that ought to do it. I guess these much older discs are just ever so slightly bigger. Because now, just clears the tone arm holder. So I don't think I'm going to get much audio out of this particular one because it's very clearly not a micro groove. Use needle pressure not in excess of 2 ounces. 2 ounces. Just for reference here, that's tracking at 5 grams right now. So very clearly meant for one of those old players with the needle you throw out after every use. All right, this is another one that starts on the inside. So let's go to the very outside here.
And now the Jello family presents
Henry Aldrich.
Come in, Robin. Yes, it's the Aldrich family based on characters originated by Clifford Goldsmith and starring Ezra Stone as Henry with Jackie Kelk as Homer. And yes, it's the Jello family.
Oh, the big red letters stand for the Jello family. Oh, the big red letters stand for the Jello family. That's Jello. Yum, yum, yum. Jello pudding. Yum, yum, yum. Jello tapioca curry.
And now for the Aldrich family.
Oh!
When you take a typical American family, plus some friends and neighbors, and then add one teenage boy, you needn't bother to stir things up.
Okay, so more tracking force pushes it down into the 3mm groove, and then you get that surface noise. But if you bring it up a little bit, you lose that surface noise, but you still get the side-to-side motion. Oh, interesting. I'm going to try and put more weights on the back there. Let's see if we can get this sounding a little better.
Call operator. Give me Elm 431. Now remember, Homer, I don't want you to spend a cent over $4 or $5. Yes, Agnes. Unless you promise you'll get me something cheaper for my birthday. Oh. Call him. This is Homer. Did you think of anything yet? What? But him. Yeah, him. Yeah, him. Yeah, I know, but... I suppose so.
Yeah, so ideally you need a 3mm stylus, but you can kind of hear how clear this could sound with all that noise at the bottom of the groove. And I had to pull the tracking force way back to the point where I think this is a little too light for this particular cartridge. Oh man, this record has a smell to it. What's interesting is both of the ones that started on the inside, they say start inside. I just, needed to read that. Does that have 2 holes? That does have 2 holes. That's a second hole here. I wonder if some of the older transcription record players had a second hole there to hold it in place so it wouldn't slip. Yeah, look at that. It's got, oh, you know why? Because this wasn't stamped. This was actually recorded on a transcribing machine. And it had this little extra peg here because of all the weight that the recording needle's pushing down to keep it from slipping. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, check it out. It's a blank. It was sold as a blank. Audio disc recording blank. And then it's got the 3 transcribing recording machine hold. I don't know why this one's been pushed through, but it looks like they just went and stuck their sticker over top of this blank sticker. For anyone curious about the tracking force that I pulled it back to, it's 4.33 grams. It's a very hard screen to film. 4.33 grams. So just at the edge of what this thing will accept. But the best solution would be to get a proper sized stylus. And just to kind of finish up the outside here, I filled this little hole in. Some more arts and crafts time. For this, I just went to the local dollar store and bought this cheap plastic serving tray for like $1.25 and just cut the plastic out of it. I also used some electrical tape to cover up all the holes and gave it a unique name. Quick interlude while I wait for the new cartridge to come in. I ordered a replacement cartridge, so hopefully that fixes the channel issue. And it also has the little flip 78 LP 0.7mm and 3mm stylus, kind of like this old BSR. But in the meantime, I want to deal with the sound quality. It just doesn't sound quite right. It sounds very tinny, which is an issue with hooking a ceramic cartridge up to a line input. Did some reading. Apparently the main reason is because these little piezo electric ceramic cartridges require a very high impedance input in the order of like 1 meg to up to 10 meg for some apparently really fancy ones. Whereas an average, auxiliary line level line in on a stereo is like 50K or something. So I went scouring the internet, did a bunch of reading, and found a circuit that someone had put on a forum. So thank you, user I'm putting here. I'll put the link in the description of where I found it if anyone wants to build this. And I want to show you the difference it made. So this is a different turntable I have. Have it on 78 because the LP side of the stylus is completely borked, so I've ordered another one of those. So unfortunately, we're going to have to test it on an old 78. But I want you to hear the difference going through this little circuit. So this is a TL072, which is a JFET, and it's basically acting as a buffer. So the idea is you have a high impedance input going through this buffer, and it actually has a bit of a gain as well on the inverting feedback side. The design he has a little resistor network going in it, which gives some gain, which is good because it's a little bit quiet otherwise on a line in. And then it goes to the output. So right now I just have the right channel hooked up through this, and the left channel I have hooked up directly. And yeah. Now the one downside so far I've noticed is that there's a bit of a 60 hertz hum, which I was experiencing before, and I think it's just having all this audio cabling completely exposed and not shielded properly. Okay, if I turn the sound up here, it's pretty noticeable. But let's hear the sound difference. I might pipe this in directly if it doesn't come through on the camera very well. So first off, here is the ceramic cartridge going direct.
First couple ready. First couple sending way uptown. Bring that other couple down. Take them up and lay them down. And away you go all around.
And now here it is going through the little buffer here.
The corner, swing around all. Swing your corners, one and all. Now go back and swing your own. You swing your hand me all along.
So again, a 78 is probably not the best example. This is a pretty old one. It's pretty scratched. But it sounds a lot fuller. It's not tinny. It sounds about as good as I would expect from one of these. Really, best foot forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out how I can build this into that transcription turntable. The only unfortunate part is that while the schematic says that this can run on 9 volts, the person who created this did say you might have to double that, and I did. It is actually pretty distorted at 9 volts. So the voltage is going to be a challenge because I'm running that turntable on 5 volts. But anyway, I will see you when all the parts come in and I've figured out how to integrate this. Okay, I came up with a solution for the voltage by Googling how to do it and then stealing a circuit that someone else made. I'll link the video right there. Simple voltage doubler using a 555 timer. So I've got 9 volts on the input, which I believe the motor inside that Crosley should work with. I think the datasheet said like 9 to 12 volts or 5 to 12 volts. So it should work on 9. And this is not quite doubling it, but increasing it to about 15 volts, which is good for this. There doesn't seem to be any distortion at 15 volts. So if I bring that down, and we'll listen to it. So I'm happy with that. And this works well because then I can just run the transcription record player off a 9 volt single voltage source, and I can just tuck all this in underneath on a proper board, not the breadboard. This is just temporary. All right, this is getting crazy. I've gone and built it onto a little perf board. So since the breadboarding worked, built it on a little circuit here. So the plan is that I'm going to just sort of hot snot this inside the transcription record player and wire it in directly. So it's got 9 volts coming in, and that provides under load about 15 volts for this little buffer circuit. Sounds nice and clear and loud. You have the input from the ceramic cartridge here, right, ground, left. And then this is the output that gets wired to the RCA jacks, ground, right, left. And yes, I know it looks super janky. I did not really plan this out very well. This is just sort of a last minute evening thing. I just don't know when to stop. And just to confirm, I checked the label on the motor. It says 5/12 volts, but it'll work for anything in between. I actually checked the speed of this platter on all 3 speeds at 9 volts, and it's perfect. Can't show you because the phone I'm recording on also has the app. But yeah, very low current draw. Like if I stall out the motor, I'm barely pulling anything. All right, just testing this out, and just grabbed a regular old LP because the cartridge on here is for LPs. Using this, of course, the angle's gonna be shit, but whatever. I mean, it's sacrificial. This is all getting replaced. So what I've done is I've set it up so that there's a motor out power that comes from the switch here. And if you can hear that popping from my stereo, that's actually turning on and off the little buffer amp inside. So if I go and play this, and you're gonna have to take my word for it, it sounds so much better than hooking it up directly. which we can no longer do on this one. Also, let me actually have this playing something. This uses like no power at all. It's using about 30 milliamps. So that means that I just need to find a 9-volt power brick for this, and it doesn't really have to be able to supply like a full amp like that label on the back shows for 5 volt. That must have just been all the amplifier and Bluetooth circuitry. There has to have been at least one of you who was screaming at the screen when I mentioned the low current draw on this. So yeah, that's a problem. Most of the wall warts I have sitting in bins, of which I want to use, are unregulated. So for example, this 9-volt power supply is designed to supply 9 volts under load. But if it's not under load, it floats up closer to 13 volts. And going through my bin of power supplies, I really only have 5-volt and 12-volt regulated wall warts. I don't have any 9-volt ones. All the 9-volt, 9 to 11-volt ones are just completely unregulated. And, you know, I get 13 volts, 14 volts, 15 volts under load with this thing because it draws so little current. So what I've done is I've added a little 10-volt regulator. This little 7810 that was sitting in my parts bin, complete with the little circuit board. And I just cut the positive trace along the bottom there. And I just scraped away some solder mask and a little bit on the negative side to insert this voltage regulator. So now, even though I'm using a 9-volt unregulated wall wart, the input's 13 volts, but the output is about 9.9 volts. Which is fine. It's a little bit higher than I was feeding this, but it's well within the spec of all the parts and sides, so shouldn't be a problem. There, perfect. I ran out of label tape in my label maker, but that'll suffice. And here's the final product for the inside. There's the 10-volt regulator I added. Here's the audio out, going to this little header here. This is the voltage. I have it going through a motor switch. So this one's common ground, this is switched coming from the tone arm, and this is voltage supply coming from the 10-volt regulator. And then this is the input coming from the tone arm to the little buffer amplifier circuit. And I did a pretty half-assed job taping up these wires because they're so tiny, and if I ever need to get at them again, just having this flat piece of tape makes it easy to undo. So clean these wires up a little bit. You can see the shiny underside of that serving tray. This is janky as all hell. Here it is, finished and ready for demonstration. For those who skipped all the nitty-gritty stuff, welcome. This is my Nakamichi Dragon. This is a 16-inch transcription record player that I built out of a broken Victrola branded suitcase record player, one of those modern ones you see in the trendy mall stores that everyone loves to hate. This one was dead, the circuit board was shorted, so I pulled all that out. The modifications I did for it to play a 16-inch transcription record, now 16-inch being 4 inches larger in diameter than the standard LP. That's a transcription record. It's massive. Here's putting a 12-inch LP on top of it, and here it is compared to a 45 RPM 7-inch record. So it wouldn't fit on a regular turntable. I moved the platter this way, and I moved the tone arm that way. So you can see that they're way more spaced out. A lot of hot glue, a lot of random pieces of plastic. This was done as cheaply as possible. A big pen to extend the tone arm, because now the way the tone arm extends out and pulls back here, I had to make it longer so that it wouldn't skew too much from the tracks. It's still a little bit off center, but I think these record players are just in general. I added a counterweight on the back. So this is a bolt glued to the back, and then I have some nuts that I lock onto it. When I got this, it was tracking at 6.5 grams, I believe. This cartridge, or at least the one it came with, was 4 to 6 is recommended, 5 being sort of ideal. So this is now set to 5 grams tracking force. And then since I pulled all the guts out on the inside, I built a little circuit to act as a preamp for the ceramic cartridge inside this tone arm here, which needs a high impedance input. And the circuit I originally built had about a 10 decibel gain, the original designer had put in there. And when I tested it with a different turntable and an older cartridge, it sounded great. Then when I tested it with the cartridge that this came with, and now this replacement one, I guess the modern ceramic cartridges are a lot hotter, way too distorted. So I had to go in and modify it to get rid of that gain. And for those wondering what that mod was, all you have to do is change the 100K and 47K to a short, so a 0 ohm at the 100K, and then you take out the 47K, so open. That's it. But yeah, this just outputs a nice line level, and voltage 10 to 12 volts input, which runs the platter motor and the little preamp circuit. So let's test it out. So these transcription records were used sometime around the mid-century. I want to say probably earlier than the 30s, but definitely 30s, 40s, and into the 50s. And they were used at radio stations, or in this case, the US Armed Forces had a radio service where they would send these out to get played for the troops when they're overseas. So kind of like a pseudo radio station. Imagine in MASH when they had like stuff coming out of the speakers. And the advantage of these, as weird as it sounds, this says program time 15 minutes, but some of the ones I have store 20, 25 minutes on one side. That was huge back in the day when a 78 RPM shellac record would hold, what, 3-4 minutes? So this runs at 33 RPM. This particular one, if we take a look here, it doesn't say, but this uses a wider groove, so not a micro groove or an LP. So I went and put a cartridge in here that takes the little flip styluses. Got the stylus flipped over to 78. Let's give it a go.
You will find greater peace of mind knowing there's a bluebird of happiness. Up and along towards the Golden West today. Now here's Charlie at the controls. Here's Tony Boy shoveling on some coal. And here's Georgie, he's tooting the whistle. And me, here's what I'm a-singing. California, here I come, right back where I started from.
So yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty dang good to me. And let's grab one of these. I have one of these Armed Forces transcription records that's micro groove, so it's a little bit more modern. Here's the newer one. This is from 1957. The other one is from 1947 with micro groove. So I have the stylus set to LP, and let's give it a listen.
You know how it is.
No, I don't.
Well, I didn't know you were out already. Thought you had 3 more years to go.
Oh, I did, but good behavior cut 3 years off my sentence.
Well, that's wonderful, Charlie. I'm glad you're out. Must have been a terrible experience. You've changed. It was hard to recognize you at first.
Well, perhaps the prison pallor doesn't become me. My hair has turned completely gray. I don't look too good, do I, Henry? Not like you with that Florida tan.
How is Helen?
I've noticed that the micro groove record, this one specifically, is much quieter than the older ones. And that actually threw me off, because when I played this with the 10 decibel gain inside the circuit, it sounded fine. And then when I went to go play some other records, either like normal music records or those other transcription records, they were distorted to all hell. So I guess this one was just recorded a lot quieter, maybe because microgroove was kind of a new thing at the time and they were exploring the space of dynamic range. And lastly, this was that very old transcription record, CBC Radio Canada. And this one was the recorded record. So this one was actually recorded on like a transcription record recorder. And it has 3 holes I showed earlier. One is exposed by here, and the other 2 are covered by the label. Because I guess those old transcription record recorders, you know, you need to fight the drag of the needle that's recording the groove. And this one is interesting because it feels heavier, right? It doesn't bend as much. Now, I don't know if this is necessarily vinyl. It's definitely off-gassing a very particular smell compared to the others. But you can see here, so get the zoom to, or the focus, it's metal. So this coating here, whether this is vinyl or something else, is coating metal. This is a metal disc, and the recordable material is basically coated on top of it, which makes for a very rigid, slightly heavier disc compared to the others. And I looked it up, the Aldridge family on NBC Radio. This one, the outro is brought to you by Jell-O. Now that was from 1939 to 1940. They were sponsored by Jell-O according to Wikipedia. So this is from around 1939, 1940.
But Agnes. Here, start talking. Yes, ma'am. Hello, operator. Give me Elm 431.
Now remember, Homer, I don't want you to spend a cent over $4 or $5.
Yes, Agnes.
Unless you promise you'll get me something cheaper for my birthday.
Oh. Hello, Hen. This is Homer. Did you think of anything yet? Uh-huh. What?
So that's it. Just kind of wanted to get this video out there to show what I made. I've had a lot of fun making it. And again, maybe give people ideas if you find these transcription records and want a way to play them. This was a very affordable way to do it. I think all in, this cost under 20 Canadian dollars to do. And an evening of mucking around with different parts. So, yeah, if you made it this long, thank you for watching. Bye.
The Aldridge family is brought to you by the Jell-O family.
Oh, the big red letters stand for the Jell-O family. Oh, the big red letters stand for the Jell-O family. That's Jell-O.
Yum, yum, yum.
Jell-O puddings. Yum, yum, yum. Jell-O tapioca pudding, yes, sirree.